As technology advances, our need for testing on animals becomes less and less. However, they are still forced to participate in these awful experiments that should no longer be allowed. I am against animal testing for many different reasons. One is because it's cruel and inhumane. Some experiments are useless. There's many other methods for testing that would keep animals out of that. Animals are not exactly the same as humans. Some of their test results can come back inconclusive, and some of these experiments are not necessary in many different cases. So animal testing is extremely cruel and inhumane, which is one of the biggest reasons why it should not be allowed. There are so many animals killed each year from testing on them. They're tortured and they're kept in captivity their whole life. And what's sad is that these animals that are used for animal testing cannot be adopted afterwards because they might have something wrong with them because of the experiment that was run on them. There's wild animals that are captured. They're taken from their home and they are kept in captivity to be experimented on, which is extremely wrong. Well, I was looking at a couple different experiments that are continuing to go on. I found a couple, and one of them is a experiment on baby monkeys. And what had happened was they bred these monkeys and took the babies away from them the day they were born. And they pretty much wanted to see what would happen if these baby monkeys developed without a parent. So half of the babies that were taken from their mothers had inflicted trauma on themselves. They suffered from fear, anxiety, and depression. And their misery led to hair loss, diarrhea, and even self-mutilation. So what these experimenters have done, which made this a very unethical experiment, is that one of the baby monkeys, they took its mom and sedated her and put the baby monkey back in the cage with her and laughed at them as the baby struggled to try and save its mom because he thought there was something wrong with her, and she fought to stay awake to comfort her baby. And there's video evidence of them laughing at her. So that is one reason why animal experiments should be just, especially for people like that who can't treat them with respect for what they are doing for us, those should no longer be allowed. There's also another test on baboons, which they took 22 pregnant baboons and tested them in different straps to see which babies would survive with different straps. So they were pretty much testing seatbelts for us, is what they were doing. And they tested them with different brutal force impacts based on the straps that they had on, and they found that the over-the-shoulder strap was the best strap that kept the baby alive. But so many baby monkeys died, or I guess the pregnant moms lost their babies. So that's another experiment that is very cruel and inhumane. Some experiments are also unhelpful. Either the tested products don't get approval, or they're very, very expensive, and we could find some other cheaper alternatives to testing on animals. And then the results are inconclusive, which means that because we're testing on different species for products that we're going to use, the results might not always come out how we're expecting them to, or they might react differently with humans. An experiment for this is a experiment on cats where they basically drilled holes into their brain or into their skulls and had metal coils implanted in their eyes, and they were deprived of food and water, and some were even intentionally deafened, and they were locked in restraint devices and forced to listen to sounds coming from different directions, all for just a little bite of food. And some of these cats have been here for over 10 years. So PETA went and looked at this experiment to see what was going on, and they found that many of these cats, they found that all the cats in the laboratory were diagnosed with chronic infections, and one cat even had to have her eye removed because the infection just was so bad in her eye. So they did suspend this experiment for 6 months last year, and demanded them to kind of rework their experiment. So hopefully something as awful as that never comes back again. There's other methods for testing, like in vitro methods and in silico methods, which are basically using cells and tissue to do experiments, and then also using computer models. We also have human volunteers for the less gruesome experiments. When it comes down to just staring at pictures or memorizing words, we have human volunteers that we would be more than happy to do that. These take less time and less money. And an example for this I wanted to share was actually with our U.S. military. And what they do is to train their soldiers different trauma, like how to deal with the different traumas in battles. They take goats and they pretty much do awful things to them, stab them, shoot them, no sedation whatsoever for these animals, and they basically have their soldiers try to help them based on the wounds that they might see on the battlefield. And the most sad thing about this experiment is that there's so many other methods available, and if you look at the militaries across the world, how they're training their soldiers are either using computer models, and the U.S. is still using animals when there's no need for it, and it's been proven that there's been no need to use these animals, but they continue to do so. So hopefully they will change their methods, because there's actually more better, accurate methods now, like using computer models. Also, animals are not exactly the same as humans, so the test results are not as accurate, and there's many other methods that prove to be more accurate, especially when computer models are done correctly. They are very, very accurate. And then it's unnecessary in many cases, like things for cosmetic testing and makeup. These animals are losing their lives for things that we don't even need. It's a waste, and we're killing animals without good reasons too. We're no longer using them for necessary experiments to help us find out more about ourselves. We're using them for these pointless experiments that should no longer be allowed. So the reason why we should no longer test on animals is because there are other options available that work much better. This does count as animal abuse. Just because you're doing research does not mean you should get away with abusing animals. And animals don't deserve to live a life like that. Humans wouldn't want to live a life like that, so why should we be forcing animals into living a life like this?